If you thought Libya had already seen its worst, think again. Because what happened on the night of February 3rd, 2025, was not just another killing. It was not just another headline buried under the weight of a broken nation. This was a message. Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, the son of the late Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi, was shot dead inside his own home. Not on a battlefield, not in exile, not during a political rally. Inside his house in Zintan. According to reports, it happened fast, too fast. 4 armed men, masked, organised, silent. They stormed the property like shadows in the dark. The first thing they did, they disabled the security cameras. That tells you something. This wasn't random, this wasn't emotional. This was planned. They knew the layout, they knew the timing, they knew exactly what they came for. And within minutes, it was over. Saif al-Islam, once considered the heir to Libya's most controversial ruler, was lying lifeless in the very country his father once controlled with iron fists and flowing robes. The gunman disappeared before security forces arrived. No arrests, no immediate claims of responsibility, just silence. But in Libya, silence is loud, and the silence that followed his death was deafening. Because whether people loved him or hated him, Saif was never just another politician. He was a symbol, a reminder, a possibility. To some, he represented the ghost of dictatorship, a painful past many wanted buried forever. But to others, he represented stability. Let's be honest. Libya has not known peace since 2011. Militias run cities. Rival governments fight for legitimacy. Oil wealth fuels corruption. Elections get postponed. Promises get broken. Chaos became normal. And in chaos, nostalgia grows. For years, whispers circulated across tribes and towns. Life was better before. At least there was order. At least the streets were safe. And at the centre of that nostalgia stood one name on the I met someone dar. Saif al-Islam. He wasn't his father. At least that's what many believed in the early 2000s. Educated abroad, fluent in English, comfortable in Western circles. He talked about reform, democracy, human rights. He negotiated hostage releases. He smiled beside foreign leaders. He looked like a modern face for a modern Libya. But then 2011 happened. The Arab Spring reached Libya, and the streets filled with protest. The regime shook. And in that moment, Saif made a choice. Instead of standing with reform, he stood with power. He appeared on television in a fiery speech, warning of rivers of blood, civil war, chaos, division. For many Libyans, that was the moment his image shattered. From reformer to defender of a collapsing empire. When Muammar Gaddafi was captured and killed, Saif vanished. Rumours swirled. Desert hideouts, secret escapes, foreign asylum. Then came the shocking images. Captured in Zintan. Bruised, wounded, alive. The world expected The Hague, war crimes, charges, international trial. It never happened. Instead, he remained in Libya, a ghost in the system, sentenced in absentia, reportedly released, always present, never fully visible. And then, years later, the comeback. He announced plans to run for president. That single announcement shook Libya's fragile political balance. Some celebrated, others panicked. Because love him or hate him, Saif al-Islam was not irrelevant. He had tribal backing, loyalists, quiet support from those exhausted by chaos, and that makes a man dangerous. So when the bullets tore through his home that night, the question wasn't just who killed him. The real question was, who was afraid of him? Because in Libya, power is not won by speeches alone. It is protected by guns. And Saif al-Islam Gaddafi had just stepped back into a game where the stakes are survival. Now he's dead. But here's where it gets darker. The kind of operation that killed him doesn't happen without planning, and planning means motive. So who had the most to gain from removing him permanently? That's where the story truly begins. You see, in a country like Libya, nobody moves without stepping on someone else's interests. And Saif al-Islam was stepping on a lot of them. After announcing his political return, he didn't just reappear. He reactivated old loyalties. Tribes that once stood firmly behind his father began whispering again. Networks that had gone quiet during years of chaos started reconnecting. Former regime supporters, long sidelined, suddenly saw a path back to relevance. And that is dangerous in a country run by fragmentation. Because since 2011, Libya hasn't truly had one government. It has had governments, plural, competing, distrustful, armed. In the West, one authority. In the East, another. And between them, militias. Dozens of them, each controlling checkpoints, oil routes, border crossings, each with weapons, each with money flowing through unofficial channels. For many of these groups, instability is not a problem. It's a business model. Chaos allows leverage. Division allows negotiation power. Weak central authority allows local control. Now imagine what Saif represented to them. He wasn't just a candidate. He was a unifying symbol for factions that had lost power after his father's fall. If enough tribes rallied behind him, if enough frustrated citizens chose nostalgia over uncertainty, if elections actually happened, he could have consolidated influence, and consolidation threatens those who thrive in disorder. Think about it. If Libya suddenly had a strong central leadership backed by historical loyalty and tribal support, what happens to militia commanders who carve territories for themselves? What happens to politicians who built careers on temporary arrangements? What happens to warlords whose authority depends on division? They shrink. They lose leverage, they lose money, they lose protection. That alone creates motive. But then there's the political class. When Saif announced his presidential ambitions, it didn't just make headlines, it rattled alliances. Some politicians publicly dismissed him, others privately panicked. Because whether they admitted it or not, he had name recognition that no new politician could match. In fragile political systems, perception is power, and Saif carried a legacy. Controversial, yes, but powerful. Poll whispers suggested he had strong support in southern regions, in areas tired of broken promises, in communities that felt abandoned by post-revolution leadership. If elections were held and he performed strongly, the entire balance could shift. Some leaders would lose seats, some would lose immunity, some might even face scrutiny for decisions made during Libya's chaotic years. When survival is political, elimination becomes strategy. And then, there's revenge. Let's not romanticize this. The Gaddafi era was not gentle. Families lost loved ones. Dissidents disappeared. Prison walls swallowed opposition voices. For many Libyans, Saif wasn't a reformer who tried. He was part of a machine that crushed resistance. His 2011 speech still echoes in memory. The warning of rivers of blood, the defense of his father's rule. For some, that was unforgivable. Time does not always heal in post-conflict societies. Sometimes it just buries anger deeper. Could this have been personal? A calculated act by someone who waited years for justice they felt never came? Possibly. But here's what complicates that theory. The attack was clean, professional. They disabled surveillance first. That requires knowledge, planning, equipment, coordination. They executed the hit and escaped before response forces arrived. That doesn't feel like raw emotion. That feels strategic. And then comes the shadow nobody likes to speak about openly. Foreign interests. Libya is not just a broken nation. It's a strategic prize. Oil reserves, Mediterranean positioning, influence in North Africa. External powers have backed different sides for years, funding militias, supporting rival governments, protecting economic interests. A strong, independent political figure with nationalist roots could disrupt carefully balanced arrangements. If Saif gained power, would he renegotiate oil deals? Would he centralize authority in ways that reduced foreign leverage? Would he realign alliances? Those questions alone create discomfort beyond Libya's borders. Now, there is no proof, only patterns, and patterns matter. Because in Libya, high-level assassinations rarely happen in isolation. And what's even more suspicious, no group claimed responsibility. In Libya's militia culture, claiming a high-profile hit often increases status. It signals strength, it intimidates rivals. But this time, silence. Silence suggests sensitivity. Silence suggests someone who doesn't want attention. Silence suggests calculation, which leads to one unsettling possibility. This was not about emotion, it was about timing, because Saif wasn't just alive, he was re-emerging. He was re-emerging, and someone decided the window had to close permanently. Now the bigger question becomes, what does his death unlock? Because in unstable systems, removing one piece doesn't simplify the board, it reshuffles it. And reshuffling power in Libya is never peaceful. The morning after Saif al-Islam was killed, Libya did not explode. And that might be the most dangerous part. No immediate nationwide uprising. No instant militia declaration of war. No dramatic takeover of government buildings. Just tension. Unspoken tension. Because in Libya, people have learned something over the years. Chaos doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it builds quietly. Until it snaps. Saif's supporters didn't rush into the streets immediately. They watched. They listened. They waited. And waiting in Libya is never passive. Across the south and parts of central Libya, tribal elders began holding private meetings. Not public rallies, private discussions. The kind where phones are turned off and loyalties are measured carefully. Because for many of these tribes, Saif wasn't just a political candidate. He was their bridge back to relevance. After 2011, many pro-Gaddafi tribes lost influence. Their access to power diminished. Their economic positioning weakened. In the new Libya, they were often viewed with suspicion, sometimes outright hostility. Saif represented restoration, not necessarily dictatorship, restoration of dignity, of leverage. And now that possibility is gone. When groups feel politically erased, they don't just disappear, they reorganize. Already accusations are circulating quietly. Some fingers point west, some whisper militia names. Others suggest political elites. But here's the problem. No matter who pulled the trigger, trust has been damaged even further, and Libya was already running on very little of it. Think about the upcoming political roadmap. Delayed elections, international mediation, fragile ceasefires. How do you convince political actors to sit at negotiation tables when a high-profile presidential contender was just assassinated in his own home? What message does that send? It says politics is still settled with bullets, and when bullets speak louder than ballots, the entire system weakens. Some of Saif's opponents may feel relief. They no longer have to campaign against him. No longer have to calculate his tribal influence, no longer have to worry about his symbolic weight. But relief can quickly turn into miscalculation, because removing a figure like Saif does not erase his support base, it radicalizes it. Already online discourse is shifting. Supporters aren't just mourning, they're asking questions. Who benefits? Why so precise? And here's where things become even more complicated. Saif was not operating loudly in recent months. He wasn't holding mass rallies. He wasn't aggressively campaigning in public squares. His movements were careful, measured, which suggests something important. He may have been negotiating behind the scenes, quietly building alliances, and if that's true, then his assassination could disrupt more than just his candidacy. It could disrupt deals. Understand this clearly. Libya's power structure isn't only public, it's layered. Tribal agreements, militia understandings, oil revenue arrangements, regional promises. If Saif was close to securing meaningful backing from even a few major actors, that alone could shift calculations. And if someone discovered momentum building in his favour, they might have decided not to wait for elections. International observers are watching closely, because instability in Libya doesn't stay contained. It affects migration routes, oil markets, regional security balances. If tensions escalate between tribal loyalists and rival factions, the fragile calm could fracture quickly. And remember, Libya is heavily armed. Weapons didn't disappear after the revolution. They multiplied. All it takes is one retaliatory strike, one accusation that gains traction, one misinterpreted movement, and the dominoes begin to fall. But perhaps the most haunting question isn't about who killed Saif. It's about whether his death was meant to send a broader warning. A warning to other political figures considering stepping outside the accepted balance. A warning that certain lines cannot be crossed. Then this assassination wasn't just about eliminating a man. It was about enforcing invisible boundaries. And boundaries enforced by violence create fear. Fear reshapes political behaviour. Some potential candidates may now hesitate. Some tribal leaders may rethink alliances. Some negotiations may freeze entirely, which means the road to elections, already fragile, becomes even more uncertain. Saif al-Islam's death did not simplify Libya's political map. And in a country already fractured, complication can quickly turn into confrontation. Now the final and perhaps most unsettling question remains. If this was strategic, what was the endgame? If this assassination was strategic, then it wasn't about the past. It was about control of the future. Because here's the reality many won't say out loud. Libya was approaching another turning point. Elections were still uncertain, yes. Political dialogue was fragile, yes. And Saif al-Islam's presence complicated that conversation. He forced every political actor to calculate differently. He forced militias to reconsider alignments. He forced foreign stakeholders to re-evaluate outcomes. He forced the question nobody wanted to answer. What if a Gaddafi returned through the ballot instead of the bullet? That possibility alone carried weight. Now remove him from the equation. Immediately the electoral field changes. Power blocks breathe easier. Political rivals re-strategize. Certain negotiations no longer need contingency plans. It simplifies things, at least on the surface. When a political figure with real support is eliminated violently, it doesn't erase his influence, it mythologizes it. Saif is no longer a candidate who could lose an election. He is now a symbol of interruption. And symbols are powerful in divided nations. His supporters can now rally around grievance instead of campaign strategy. Instead of debating policies, they can point to injustice. Instead of arguing votes, they can question legitimacy. And grievance spreads faster than manifestos. But there's another possibility, a colder one. What if this wasn't just about stopping him from winning? What if it was about preventing reconciliation altogether? Because for all his controversy, Saif represented a bridge between pre-2011 Libya and post-2011 Libya, a figure who could have drawn former regime loyalists into the formal political process instead of leaving them. Without that bridge, those communities may feel permanently excluded, and exclusion breeds parallel systems. Parallel systems breed instability. If tribes that supported him conclude that the political arena is closed to them, they may look elsewhere for leverage. And in Libya, leverage often means force. On the other side, his opponents may feel emboldened. They may believe the path is now clear to consolidate authority, but power gained in a climate of fear is fragile, because every leader now understands something very clearly. If Saif al-Islam could be eliminated inside his own guarded home, no one is untouchable. That realization alone reshapes political behavior. Meetings become more cautious, alliances become more secretive, trust shrinks. And when trust shrinks in a post-conflict state, suspicion fills the vacuum. International actors are watching closely, but out of interest. Libya's oil flows matter, migration routes matter, Mediterranean stability matters. If Saif's death triggers retaliation or fractures tribal alignments, the ripple effects won't stay local. But perhaps the most haunting reality is this: we may never get a clear answer. Investigations in Libya often fade into bureaucracy, politics, or silence. Evidence disappears, witnesses retract, files stall, and over time, another unresolved killing becomes part of the national memory. But this one feels different, because Saif al-Islam was not a militia commander. He was not a mid-level politician. He carried a name that shaped decades of Libyan history. Killing him wasn't just removing a man, preventing one from being rewritten. So now Libya stands at another crossroads. Will this assassination push factions back into confrontation? Will it harden divisions beyond repair? Or will it force a serious reckoning about how politics is conducted in a country still healing from revolution? One thing is certain: the night those cameras went dark in Zintan, more than a life was extinguished. A possibility was. And in Libya, when possibilities are eliminated by force, the consequences rarely end quietly. The real question now isn't just who ordered the killing, it's whether Libya can survive the message it sent.